The ham radio reporting system, RST, readability, strength and tone, has been with us since the 1930s. But I wonder how it compares today with how it was intended to be used. And I wonder who's fooling who. So let's take a look at the ham radio RST system. Yes, we're going to go back to the 1930s first of all and see how this code or this reporting system originated. R stood for readability, how well you could hear the station, whether it was very weak and therefore you couldn't hear what he was saying, or whether it was a good signal. And then we had the S signal, which actually told the station at the other end how strong you were receiving him. And finally we had the tone, because in those days CW was one of the prime methods of communication. So what was the tone of the signal like? Was it rough? Was it smooth? And there were suffixes to that. One was C for chirp, and one was K for key clicks. You still sometimes hear key clicks actually. But that's the reporting system, and it was all to do with how you heard the signal. You listened to the signal and you decided how you would give the report to the station by your listening experience. Was it strong? Was it medium? Was it weak? Was it difficult to read? And what was the tone of the signal if you were sending CW? Now, it wasn't too long before receivers started to have what is now known as an S meter, a signal meter. And that is really where the confusion starts to become a little bit of a problem. But let's first of all look at the original reporting system. First of all, let's put up on the screen what the readability was. It goes from 1 to 5, and you can see on the screen there what the interpretation of 1 is, and all the way up to 5. And now let's put up on the screen the strength, the signal strength reporting system, which went from 1 to 9. And you see that S9 is very strong and S1 is very faint. So it seems to be quite a reasonable reporting system. Now, with the introduction of S meters, it was generally regarded that a 50 microvolt signal at the 50 ohm aerial terminal would equate to an S9 signal, because a 50 microvolt signal is pretty strong. And that became a sort of industry standard. But what did not really become an industry standard was what the difference was between one S point and another. 6 dB has generally over the period of ham radio been regarded as the difference in signal strength. So S8 is 6 dB down on S9, or S9 is 6 dB better than S8. So in other words, each S point represented a 6 dB increase. Now, I believe Eddystone changed that. I'm not sure it was 4 or 5 dBs, but there were various interpretations. What has tended to stay with us is that 50 microvolts is S9. And I say tends to stay with us because you can't actually be sure how the S meters are calibrated from one model of radio to another. Now we begin to get problems with the RF gain control. The modern RF gain control doesn't actually affect the signal strength measured by the meter. You will find that as you rotate the RF gain control back slightly, the meter will rise. But as soon as the signal matches where the RF gain control has been rotated to, the meter will start to move. So in other words, let's supposing that you rotate your RF gain control anti-clockwise to reduce the signal strength. You reduce it by, I don't know, let's say you reduce it by 3 S points. The S meter will rise to register 3 S points, and therefore any weak signal won't move the meter, because the meter is now not resting at 0, it's resting at S3. So that kind of S meter tends to be honest. When a signal is S9, it will read S9. But some S meters and some RF gain controls don't work that way. Some RF gain controls, as soon as you back them off, it reduces the signal and the measured signal strength of the S meter goes down. So with full RF gain control, that was usually fully clockwise, you might see an S9 signal. But you want to reduce the gain a bit because things are a bit noisy, so you reduce the gain a bit. And the actual signal strength goes down. The S meter reads S7. But in actual fact, the signal hasn't changed in strength. It's all that's happened is your setup. You've reduced the RF gain control. You've made the S meter read S7 instead of S9. So you get a bit of confusion. Very often the bands are quite noisy. And most modern transceivers have got an attenuator in there. And you switch the RF attenuator in right at the front end. And that has the effect of reducing the signal. Nothing else has happened. The S meter is still reading the amount of signal that's coming in to the receiver. But you've reduced it by, say, 6 dB or 12 dB, whatever the attenuation is. So now you've actually changed the meaning of the S meter readings. The S meter will go from 1 to 9 with no attenuation in, but it will still go from 1 to 9 with attenuation in, except that it needs a much stronger signal. So an S9 signal can become an S7 signal on the meter when you put the attenuator in. And a lot of these transceivers have got 2 or 3 stages of attenuation. So now your meter is not really telling the truth at all. It's way out from what it would be if you didn't have any attenuation in there. So the question then is, how do you report? How do you report to the station? How do you give an honest report to the station? Do you look at the S meter and say, well, yeah, you're very strong, but you're only showing S7 on the meter? Or you're very strong and you're only showing S5 on the meter? So do you give him S5 or do you give him S9? And I think this is where it's all going a bit haywire. We really should go back, I think, to the good old days when we ignored the S meter and we simply gave a signal strength report based on what we were hearing, how it sounded to us. But then there's a further complication. Contests. Contests. If you take part in a contest, it would be very unusual for you to get a signal strength other than S9. The reason being that all these contest stations have a pre-programmed reporting system. The only thing that changes is the serial number. Everything else remains the same. So your S9, and I've heard it time and time again when they've asked you to repeat the call sign 2 or 3 times, and the report is 59007 or whatever the serial numbers to be. So the reporting system in contests is an absolute nonsense. And I've said in the past, I'm not even sure that we need a tone report now for CW, because most CW signals are pretty good, and I haven't heard a report less than a tone 9 in many a year. So I'm not sure we need the 3rd digit for reporting system. We could have 59 for SSB and 59 for CW, but we have retained the 599, which is a typical contest report, irrespective of whether you're the weakest signal going or the strongest signal going. You're 599 in the contest. So where does that leave us? Well, I'm willing to bet that a good majority of stations give reports based on what they're listening to and what they're hearing, and not what they're seeing on the meter. I think many old timers would do that. I have heard some reports and I think, wait a minute, that guy must be reading the meter. You sort of get a report of Q5, but you're only S1. Well, my bet is they've probably got some attenuation in there, or they've got the RF gain backed off. But I think, to be honest, if you want to be honest, perhaps we should go back to where it all started. We forget the S meter, we give a report based on what we're listening to, and if our setup happens to be different because we put some attenuation, well, does it really matter? Does it really matter? S9 is S9, and of course we now get S9 plus. S9 plus 10 dB plus 20 dB. Is that a bit of a nonsense? I don't know. But anyway, that's my take on S-meter readings. Sometimes think we're fooling each other when we give some of these reports. Certainly in contests, we're fooling everybody. Or perhaps we're not, because we all know that 599 is not really 599 in many cases. Thank you for watching this channel. Thank you for your support. Don't forget, at Milton Keynes, we've got a massive warehouse of gear, great prices, some great part exchange deals. So if you're in the market to upgrade your radio, give us a call. We'll be happy to discuss what you've got and what you're thinking of buying. And we're always happy to do a deal. Mention my name. In the meantime, you enjoy your ham radio. You take care. Look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye for now.